Yes, I'm so excited to get started because for me, being a fashion editor, inclusivity and empowerment are the reason why I do what I do, right? And it's just such an important part of my job and such a huge passion for me. So to be able to discuss it with you guys is a great honor today. I just want to kick things off by just having you quickly introduce yourselves and give a little bit about your background. So I'll start with you, Rebecca, if you could just introduce yourself to the viewers.
Yeah, Rebecca Minkoff, co-founder and creative director of Rebecca Minkoff and the Female Founder Collective. Started my brand 15 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying that. Feels like 100. Based in New York City, accessories at an accessible luxury price point.
Awesome. And Lilliana, how about you go next?
Absolutely. My name is Lilliana Vazquez, and I just want to say thank you to you, Jessica, Rebecca, Tanya, and of course, this incredible platform for giving us the opportunity to have a really important discussion. I am a host and producer for E! Entertainment, specifically on E! News. I am also the executive producer of Pop on Peacock, the new streaming service from NBC. And I am the founder of the LV Guide. It is an all-inclusive, accessible website that shows women how to live their most stylish life effortlessly.
Love that. That's so cool. And last but not least, Tanya, if you could tell us a little bit about your brand.
Yeah, hi, my name is Tanya Taylor. I'm a fashion designer and founder of my label. I've been around 9 years. It also feels like 100. And we are a size inclusive brand based in New York City, all about color. We hand paint our prints, and we're all about kind of creating joy and optimism in fashion.
Love that. Love that so much. All right, just to kick things off, I feel like diversity is such a buzzword these days. And, you know, you hear it being tossed around, but you wonder, do people really embrace it or even understand what it means? So if you guys could just talk a little bit about what inclusivity means to you, just not in theory, but like also in practice in your career. And how you embrace it every day in your roles. Rebecca, how about you start?
So I think there's a lot of talk about surface inclusivity, what people put on their Instagram feeds. And I think there is a huge call to action that it has to go far deeper than that. You know, how many people are represented as people of color within your company? I'm extraordinarily proud that over 50% of our staff are people of color, BIPOC. And it's not just that. I think what Aurora James did with launching the 15% pledge that anyone can get behind is, when we do reopen our office and we do reopen our stores, how do I allot 15% of my, you know, vendors, cleaning supplies, lighter, whoever I need as a resource within my stores, you know, to be funded to Black businesses. It's showing diverse talent, whether it's a podcast or an Instagram Live. It's taking a 360 approach, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's proven statistically, if you want a better business, you need to have people that don't look like you at the table. And I think so many people are so scared, and they're, you know, I guess it's saying I'm scared to be successful, right? So I think it's about how do you do this from a, not a top-down approach, but from a everywhere you look, how are you ensuring that there's representation, there's opportunities for people, and that you are putting your money where your mouth is, and it isn't just hiring a, you know, a BIPOC model for Fashion Week.
Right, 100%. That's so important. What about you, Tanya? What does inclusivity mean to you? And especially from the size inclusivity perspective, because I know that's such an important part of your brand ethos.
Yeah, I think from a diversity perspective, though, this summer, same to Rebecca's point, we realized that, you know, it's not about what we're putting out on Instagram and what looks public about the company that matters in terms of diversity, but really looking at the internal team and having really raw conversations and knowing that we're a small team, we're only 25 people, but we do hire over 50 people a year for freelance positions and people that support the company. So like, how can we have a better philosophy that is a mandate of how we approach diversity in all of our hiring decisions? And, you know, what kind of recruiting firms we're working with, what kind of volunteering opportunities we have. So I think that we've worked really closely to make sure that the values I have are aligned with what the company is doing. And that has definitely always been why size inclusivity exists. So my mom was a size 14-16. She was a chairman of the board of an all-male oil and gas company, and I would watch her get dressed and go to work and not have anything to wear and therefore feel less confident and less powerful. And I think that being able to look at contemporary fashion and see how little is available to really awesome women that are also young and fit and healthy and they love color and they want to express themselves, we want to fill that void and really be able to, you know, just give them the tools to be like their most empowered self.
Yeah. That's so important. I mean, as someone who, you know, has struggled to find dresses that fit me, like or items that really embrace my curves, I feel like that's so important. And I really like appreciate what you're doing. I'm a huge fan of your designs, but I feel like the fashion industry needs more of that. So thank you. And then Lilliana, let's talk about your platform because, you know, I always feel that like representation is just so crucial. And when it comes to like television and e-news programs, a lot of times you don't see people that look like you if you're a certain race or a certain size. So like how in your career have you really helped promote inclusivity from a representation standpoint?
Absolutely. Well, you know, one of my biggest complaints has always been that there is a single narrative that exists for my community, for the Latinx community, and for many communities of color in entertainment. And going back to what Rebecca and Tanya mentioned, you know, there's diversity and inclusion that you do for show, and then there's equity. And how do you build equity in your company across a vast scape of backgrounds, because that's what really makes us distinct and unique. And so for me, when I was given the opportunity to anchor E! News, being the only and first member of the Latinx community to have that honor, it was important to me to open the door within the structure of E! Entertainment and NBC Universal and bring in people that supported the show that also come from my background. There's not a lot of Latinx producers. There was not a Latinx stylist. There wasn't a makeup artist working in the room that represented us. And so I thought, you know, I don't own a company in the same way that Tanya and Rebecca do, but I can make and influence hiring decisions on behalf of E! and NBC that do promote that kind of diversity. And the reason that that's so important is because to say that you're doing something is one thing, but to give up an opportunity or to risk an opportunity and give it to somebody else takes it to a whole nother level. And that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm asking of myself. That's what I'm asking of my peers. That's what I'm asking of my bosses at E! and NBC, is to not to take something away from someone, because I don't think that you should look at it like that, but it's to create an opportunity for those that have less, right? And acknowledge that you have more. So let's start breaking up the pie to make space for people that are starting so far behind from where we are right now.
Right. And that's such a good segue into my next question, because I want to talk about like giving back to the community. I actually did a panel yesterday talking to college kids in vulnerable communities. And the idea is that, like you said, like some people are starting further behind, they're having disadvantages, and it's so many challenges in the way of them being successful. And I really think that it's important for us, given our platform and our careers, that we're always giving back and that we're always investing in the future of the fashion industry through young people, especially. So I wanted to talk about, Tanya, how your brand is actually giving back, because I know that you guys are very charitable and have a lot of philanthropic efforts that you're working on. So could you speak a little to that and why it's so important to you to give back?
Yeah, so I think I always kind of just grew up with a very philanthropic kind of thoughtful approach. I'm Canadian, so maybe it's part of being Canadian. But as a company, I think when COVID hit, we knew that we had access to manufacturing. We had all this excess fabric left over from retailers canceling orders. And so we just jumped into making masks. And that's one thing that we've been able to do in philanthropy this summer is we've made 180,000 masks. We've donated 30,000 of those to New York and Toronto hospitals, and just kind of put ourselves out there as a great resource. I think outside of that, maybe similar to how you were speaking to college students, we've been volunteering our time with Fashion for All Foundation, which is a really great organization that serves underrepresented college students that are interested in fashion, want to know what all the rules are in the industry, and maybe they're not just a designer. So last week, we as a team showed them how you design, fit, sell, and market a virtual collection. And I think it's a tool that they're going to need, because imagine you're a college grad right now and you're scared because you have a passion for this industry and you don't really know where you're going to fit in. So I think that that's something. And then we also have a partnership coming up this month that is focused on color and focused on donating masks and being kind of a resource for support in New York City.
Wow. I love that. I love that. Those are all really, really important efforts that your brand is making. And then Rebecca, I know we spoke about this before, but I was really heartened to see how your brand really got behind the Black Lives Matter movement and has really been a force, I think, in fighting for racial equality and very anti-police brutality. So can you talk about your efforts there and how you guys are giving back? And then if there are any other organizations too you want to highlight your work with, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, so I felt extraordinarily paralyzed, I think, as a lot of people did after George Floyd, and I was grappling with how do I do something about this, and what can I do? And so I guess my aha moment, and I mentioned her before, but the organization that Aurora James launched, the 15% pledge, was like sort of my aha moment where I said, okay, that's something I can get behind. Money equals power. Right. Money changes the economic structure of communities. And so if I can help support that in any way, I'm all in. And so was just, there to be someone that was, taking the pledge, talking about the pledge, and anything I could do. And then I said, okay, how does this trickle down? Again, how does it trickle down into my company and where our finances go? How does it trickle down into, okay, 15% of my feed every week is donated to showcasing Black founders, interviewing Black founders. I podcast with Black founders, LinkedIn interviews, wherever I have a platform, I'm sharing that 15% if it's not monetary. And then how do we go deeper? At the Female Founder Collective, we have a platform called Support Your Ladies. It's over 9,000 female founded businesses. I was like, we got to resort this list. There needs to be a Black directory. Mm-hmm. And so, not overnight, it took a long time, but we have, almost 1,000 Black businesses that you can search for. So it's very easy, again, to say, I want to spend money. I need, a new calculator, a new hair supply, a new, fem care kit. This is who I go to. And you don't have to work that hard to find out who these women are. So that's when that was for me the way that I could help make the greatest change, at least, or contribute to it, was by, just a clear example of when you look in the past, when women have money, right? And when the gender gap gets smaller, you see companies thrive, families thrive, and communities thrive. So why don't we take that same approach, not just for the Black community? I think we need to conquer it in all marginalized communities, the Latinx community, the Native Americans. I haven't touched that yet, but that's where this movement needs to go.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that actually leads me to a question I had for you, Lilliana. Because right now it's Hispanic Heritage Month, and at Bustle we're coming up with a lot of content, really featuring Hispanic designers that have had success in fashion, but also emerging designers who might need our support. And to me, it's very similar to what we saw with, as Rebecca Minkoff mentioned, after George Floyd and that racial reckoning where there was this outpour of support for Black-owned brands, and I would love to see that for other communities too. So can you speak to what you're doing on your platforms to really kind of embrace up-and-coming Hispanic designers, and also how the regular consumer can get involved and how they can help support that community?
Great question. And thank you so much for sharing that. I think sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle because it's a month that starts mid-September and it goes to mid-October. So it's not 1 month, it actually spans the course of 2 months. And that is because so many Latin American countries celebrate Independence Day in the middle of September, including Mexico, which is where my family is from. And so one of the initiatives that was really important to me was I've been with NBC since the beginning of my career. I started as a local reporter in Philadelphia at WCAU as a consumer reporter at 4:00 in the afternoon. I had no idea what I was doing, let's be very honest. But you know what? Like all entrepreneurs and builders, you build and you figure it out. And in that time, I've been with NBC at the local level in Philly, in New York, at the network level, at the Today Show, and now obviously for one of our cable affiliates with E! Entertainment. In that time, I'm saddened to say that I have never really seen any of our networks really tackle and celebrate what it means to be Hispanic or Latinx in the United States. And I wanted to change that. And in past years, I'm going to say that I have been too scared to push for change. But when I saw what my friends were doing and I saw how brave their voices were, I thought, you know what, like, it's about time that somebody speak up. And I did that. So I went to all of my leaders at E in different divisions. I went to the linear division, I went to the social division, and I went to online. And I said, listen, this is happening. You have 3 hosts, okay? But more than that, there are 60 million people in America that identify as Latinx. If you want to be successful going forward as somebody that creates content, you need to speak to these people. But first, you need to celebrate them, because you have to create authentic connection with your consumer or your client, right? And so I said, how are we going to do this? So I spearheaded an entire campaign against those 3, across those 3 divisions, to highlight and amplify Latinx stories, rule breakers who I love, philanthropy in the Latinx community, and also who I think is new and next and coming up. And that's something that we're not seeing a lot of. There were no Latinx actors nominated for the Emmys. There were no Latinx shows that were nominated for an Emmy. And the reason I think for that is because we haven't turned the volume up loud enough. And I do think that shows like E! and Entertainment Tonight and other entertainment news shows have the responsibility to amplify the incredible work that is happening in our community. So if I had to lead that by myself at E! in 2020, I am just hopeful that in 2021, all the other networks will follow suit to continue to create opportunity and visibility for this incredible community.
Right. Absolutely. I am 100% with you. And I really am inspired by the work that you're doing. And like I said, that is something that we look to at Bustle as well, just kind of making sure that that representation isn't just lip service, and that is something that we continue and that we really invest in. I know, as one of the few people of color in my job, what it's like to speak up and like the courage that it takes. So I really commend you for doing that. So I also want to talk a little bit about politics and fashion and how that kind of intersects, because I know, Tanya Taylor, you're working on a program around getting people to vote for the upcoming election and making sure that their voices are heard and encouraging voter turnout. And I think sometimes brands are hesitant to enter into that arena. Sometimes they'll think they'll alienate consumers or shoppers. So what really inspired you to get involved in that at the risk of really putting your brand out there and maybe alienating consumers? And what advice would you give to other brands who kind of want to step into the political arena but are hesitant because of that?
I thought there was just no question in speaking up. I think that there's fashion has such influence, and right now it feels like a responsibility to speak to the importance of people registering to vote. Like which is a bipartisan activity in a way. It's like, if you, regardless of which way you're going, just make sure that you know your voice matters. And so what we're doing for New York Fashion Week is, for the first time ever, not showing a new collection, but instead we're showing content around how easy it is to register. And then we've added action buttons on our website for people to be able to go and check the registration or register to vote. And it's part of Fashion Our Future. So it's this organization of different designers that have come together, headed by Abrima Aria, that is really focused on just encouraging youth to realize how important this election is. And it's risky, but I think that I started the brand to be risky, and I think it's really important to always have it stand for what you believe in.
Right. No, I totally agree. It's 100% worth the risk. And Rebecca, can you speak to that as well? Because I know that you know, and when we covered you in Bustle, we talked about, you know, for your presentation, you featuring a breastfeeding model and that being controversial, but you really embracing that part of motherhood. So can you speak to like why it's important to use your brand to speak up? And then to, like, from a political standpoint, anything that your brand is working on to really like get people to vote and be active in our political process?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kenneth Cole was probably the original trailblazer of using his ad revenue for change, especially highlighting the AIDS epidemic when it was in its infancy. And I think that more designers need to take their stance. I think, as Tanya said, like, it's too risky not to speak up and not to stand for something and to get others, when you have this huge platform, to do the same. I think the future of brands is that you know exactly who you stand with. As a customer, you know you're part of X's tribe because they have the same ideals and ethics and morals that you have. So I don't think you can't not stand up. So for Fashion Week, you know, we are doing a presentation, but we're also launching, I think it's tomorrow, our Vote tee in 3 colors, and proceeds of that t-shirt go to an organization called Vote, Run, Lead, which I love because not only does it encourage voters, but it encourages women to learn how to run for office. Because again, women are just going to do it better, and there need to be more of us represented in office.
Amen.
Yeah.
You know, from the Senate to the House of Representatives, you know, that's good. But like local, city and state, you know, if we have, you know, those are people on the ground. So they teach women how to run and how to do campaigns and get them funding. So you'll see the t-shirt come out tomorrow, and then you can buy it in your size. And then we're launching kids in a few weeks. Not that kids can vote, but I thought it was cute to have mommy and me get the younger generation excited.
Yeah. No, I love that too, because I you know, my niece is one of my favorite people. She's 14 and she's already like, I can't wait till I can vote and I know who I'm going to vote for. So I do think it's important to get them excited about the process. So that's really great. Yeah. I wanted to talk too, I know you mentioned like women leaders, and it's interesting to see on social media people talking about women leaders of nations and their response to coronavirus, and how, you know, women have made such great decisions when it comes to that. And, you know, it's just a testament to like why women need to be in leadership. So I'm 100% with you on that. But I'm curious as to how that's impacting the fashion industry. And right now, you know, as Tanya and Rebecca, you mentioned, your shows are going to look a little different this season after coronavirus. And really the whole fashion industry is grappling with changing in the wake of that. So if you could speak to how coronavirus has impacted your brand specifically, and what ways that you're transitioning in the midst of this this stage for fashion, and especially when it comes to Fashion Week. I know your shows are probably going to look a bit different, so if we can speak to that as well. Tanya, why don't you start?
Sure. I'm sure Rebecca and I would both agree that everything's changed. And the last 6 months has really kind of challenged everything you used to do, which I think is a great thing. So for us, we have always put women at the kind of core of how we grow the brand, but it's more than ever. So in the last 6 months, we have hosted so many private Zoom get to know your customer kind of events, because it's so important that what we create is for someone. Like, it doesn't feel like fashion is about making things anymore and making kind of surplus of, you know, collections and excess of shows. Like, it feels that getting to the point and being really functional, being really conscious of price points. Maybe if someone loves prints from us but can't buy a $500 dress, which we don't want them to buy right now, we've offered them puzzles, we've offered them t-shirts, we've offered them swimwear. You know, we've taken all of our old fabrics and made excess upcycled pajamas for them. So I think it's like, you know, how do we really look at someone's life and realize how much their life has changed and how much consumers have changed, and then listen and kind of react to that. So it's no longer fantasy. I think it's definitely rooted in reality now.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I've definitely seen that from a fashion writing perspective, that people are looking for comfort, they're looking for function, and things that really help them in this stage in their lives. So that's definitely great insight. And Rebecca, can you speak to how your brand shifted? And I know we talked about that a little bit in our last conversation, but you know, if there's any updates on how coronavirus has really impacted your business strategy and how you're pivoting.
Yeah, I mean, as we spoken the last time, you know, our business shrunk by over 70% in the first 2 weeks of the virus, when, you know, all of our wholesalers decided not to take in their orders or canceled them. I wish I could have turned excess leather into a mask, but I couldn't. And so we really focused on just strengthening my relationship with the consumer, whether, again, it was having these distractions from the news for an IG Live of just like, let's not focus on the news for 20 minutes of your day and let's interview someone great. Or, you know, I pivoted my podcast to be Corona specific editions. So rather than hear a woman's journey, it was how do I market during COVID? How do I sell during COVID? So that you had 15 minutes of time, hopefully when you're hiding from your children and they're homeschooling, that you could get a good tip to help your business or help you through a challenge. And I think it became a lot of, more intimate gatherings similar to Tanya, private Zooms. Just how do you take your relationship to the consumer? We're all at home, we're all on our media, and strengthen it during this time. And I'm extraordinarily grateful because theoretically a woman does not need a handbag right now, but our business is up. So, we didn't adopt a strategy to have our business go up, but in coming closer to her and really being authentic. I don't lie when I say I did most of my work the first 6 months from my bathroom floor. Because it was the only area where there were 2 doors that you couldn't hear the kids screaming. And she was like, "Oh, you're real too. That's amazing. You're suffering like I am." And so I think that obviously no one could have made a strategy to make that happen. But I think when you, again, like what Tanya said, when you boil down to what matters, it's you and your relationship to the consumer and serving her what she needs.
Right, 100%. And Lilliana, I want to speak to you from a media perspective, because I feel like we can kind of relate in how coronavirus impacted our industry and how media's really had to pivot. I remember, and I think I talked to Rebecca about this, but it became less about me covering fantasy and more me, serving my reader in a way that was very applicable to her everyday life. What she's searching for, where she can buy masks, where she can buy face shields. And having to pivot like that was challenging. So have you seen that as well in your experience? Because you're more in television. So what has that been like? And then also with your individual platform, like how have you pivoted in the wake of Corona?
Well, absolutely. When I started my blog in 2008, back when people were like, "You have a blog? Is that some kind of like disease? What is it that you have again?" I said from the beginning, I wanted my content to live on this matrix of accessibility and aspiration, right? So it looks like this. Sometimes we're in this like upper right quadrant. Sometimes we're kind of in this like back left quadrant, depending on where we are financially in our own lives and what's happening on the world around us. That has completely shifted. I've taken away the aspirational matrix and we are just living on a line of accessibility. I want real, right? And you've seen that really shift in how people like us my currency is celebrity news, right? All of a sudden, the people watching E don't really care about how celebrities are living their life in their like multi-million-dollar homes, because the rest of the world is suffering. We are going through a global pandemic that has been devastating to all of us in ways, whether it's family members that we knew, economics, it paralyzed this entire world. And it really shifted the priorities of how we storytell, because it was no longer about sharing this over-the-top aspirational fantasy, right? In the same way that fashion has shifted, right? Like Tanya was saying, like, your dresses are beautiful, but we don't have an occasion to wear one of these beautiful $500 dresses. But like, damn, I want to feel really stylish and cute in my pajamas. And that's okay. So we kind of pulled back as a network and how we program to say, okay, how can we reach them? What are some of the additional topics we can talk about? And one of those topics that we took head on was Black Lives Matter. George Floyd was murdered in front of all of us. And for the first time in history for E! News, we were talking about things that mattered in the political space. We were talking about things that mattered to us as humans, not just as somebody that sells entertainment news. And I think we underestimated how much our audience wanted of that. I think oftentimes we kind of play to the lowest common denominator and we don't elevate and inspire the people that are watching us. And that's our responsibility as creators, as artists, as fashion designers, as storytellers. Like, elevate and inspire the people who are your captive audience. And that's something that we've had to do. And I think you've seen this even just among influencers. And I know Tanya and Rebecca, you both work with so many influencers. We're seeing influencers really have to respond to this aspirational life that they have been selling and that they have built their careers on. And all of a sudden, their followers and their audience is saying, I want the real you. I don't want this like perfect version of what you think you should be selling. I want to connect to who you are. And I am so happy for that shift because I think it was long overdue. And you're seeing this rise in people who are really accessible and willing to open themselves up. And it's about vulnerability, right? It's how you communicate vulnerability to the people that are listening to you and watching you. So I've had to reset that. I definitely had walls and boundaries, and I was like, no, I want to present this way. All that went out the window because I couldn't even control my feelings for weeks on end. Like I would literally walk into my studio to shoot and I would have just been in tears because I'm taking care of my husband who has COVID and is type 1 diabetic. All of a sudden, I didn't care about how I presented. I cared that I was living something that a lot of other people were living and going through. And I think that's what has challenged us most, is to be human first and then who we present on social media. And it's okay if you lead with more vulnerability than this pretty package.
I love everything you just said, and I couldn't agree more. I think that it's like, that's how you really connect with people, and that's what really resonates. And I hope that's something that stays after this time, you know?
Please, from your lips to God's ears, please. Don't let that go away. I am like holding on to that with like a death grip because it's made Instagram for me and social media such a better experience.
Right.
And I think we all live on social. It's how you build brands. It's how you communicate. I mean, I connect to my relatives on Facebook because they're older and that's how I keep in touch. But I really hope that we see the value that this has created and how you can really shift behavior just by staying true to what it is that you really want at the core.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really speaks to the second word from this panel, which is empowerment. And I think if you're really empowering someone, you have to meet them where they are and you have to be authentic and honest. And that's where you make that connection. So that is on point. I'm like, every influencer listening, please take it from Lilliana, because that's what we want to see. And that's what really, I think, resonates with people. So I have a question for you. Oh, wait, Tanya, go ahead.
One thing we did this summer that, Lilliana, you just made me think of, and I think it was such an eye-opening shift, is we thought that people wanted to see like perfect lookbooks and perfect models in lookbooks, and it to be like photos, like not well, like retouched and like, you know, shot in a studio. But we didn't have any money to do that this summer. So what we did is we found friends, like my best friends, and we sent them clothes and we gave them full, like free reign to shoot it in their houses, style it the way they wanted, talk about their dog, talk about like dance in front of their kitchen, whatever the heck they usually do. And it was perfect. Like it was like, well, and it was better than perfect. It was like so raw, and it brought such an expression of who they were forward without any filter. And I thought it really spoke to how fashion doesn't need to hide behind that lens of perfection, but really like embrace that women have different body types. They have totally different things they're going through, and like show it. And it cost us a fraction of what we would normally spend. So it's a good silver lining.
Yeah, you know, I have to add that I really love seeing that shift, I think, with fashion brands when it comes to lookbooks like yours or like photo shoots, even at magazines. It just being more pared down and authentic, and people's like spirits and their personalities really shining through. It's just so refreshing to see. And it's something that I definitely hope continues, because, you know, the idea that fashion has to be elitist, that's so old school. It's like we need to move beyond that. And we need to democratize and really embrace the every woman. So yeah, that's spot on. So I have a quick question for you, Rebecca, from the audience. I know we were talking about philanthropy before, but an audience member wanted to ask about inventory philanthropy, and if that's something that you are doing to give back, and how do you reconcile that when clothes aren't selling or handbags aren't selling as much during the pandemic? Is that something you've done or would consider? And especially now with sales, like how do you make that work?
So once we obviously had a bigger inventory, or pile as we called it, of things when the pandemic first hit, and we had Operation Melt the Pile. And obviously to stay in business, you know, while it would have been great to donate everything, we wouldn't be around. We had to actually, you know, we paid for those goods. We had to get paid for those goods. So we have melted that pile and sold it. And we have any excess goods get donated. We work with Dress for Success. So I think we probably have dressed more women than anyone I've met. So we definitely do a healthy amount of donations, but we also cut our inventory so lean that now we don't operate with excess. And that's, again, a silver lining. And I think a lot of designers taking that approach, just cutting to sales, cutting to, more reality instead of this, drug-induced haze of I'm going to cut a lot of units and then I'm going to get rid of it. We've really adopted, a lot leaner behavior. And so we don't have much to donate, but there's about, I don't know, a couple hundred samples in this office that are going to be donated in a few days. So.
Yeah. You mentioned being leaner, and that's also something I hope that stays around post-coronavirus. I know a lot of brands are adopting made to order, or they're making less inventory, and it's actually, helps the industry as a whole be more sustainable. So that's something that I'm hoping that continues as well. So just really quickly, we don't have much time left, but if you guys could each name one thing that you hope changes in the fashion industry post-coronavirus. I mentioned sustainability, but I'd love to hear from you guys something that you hope we come out of this stage with that can make the fashion industry better for everyone. So I'll start with you, Lilliana. What do you think?
I'm unmuting myself. I would love to see more personally from Afro-Latinas. Obviously, as we embark on Hispanic Heritage Month, I do think that, in the Latinx community, we have our really big designers that we all know and love. But I really hope that we get to shine a light on this specific group of severely underrepresented women and men, especially in fashion. There is so much talent that is coming out of Cuba and the Dominican Republic and Brazil. And I really hope that we create a space for their voice. I feel as a culture, as someone who's half Mexican and half Puerto Rican, we take sometimes from our Afro-Latinos with music and food, but we don't give. And that's something that's a real priority for me is to, as I'm somebody who is considered a white passing Latina, and I'm more than aware of what that privilege has given me. So I hope that as an industry, we really start to embrace the culture and the uniqueness and the beauty of our Afro-Latina artists and designers more.
Yes, I love that. That's so important. That's so important, yes. And Rebecca, what about you? What would you love to see change in the industry?
I think in addition to everything Lilliana said and what I'm assuming Tanya's going to say, I think that I would love for the consumer to really be thoughtful about where she's getting her goods from, and that fast fashion can go away. I get it that it's an addictive drug and it's cheap, and not everyone has the wherewithal again to buy, accessible luxury items but it's better to save and buy something that's made with ethical people, with workers that are paid, with companies that maybe go over and above and take less of a margin so they can give back. Really truly know that when you're giving your money to a company that has those things in mind, you're supporting a lot more than that company. It's a whole entire ecosystem, and that's far healthier and far better for even the planet than buying the $20 top that's going to disintegrate in your laundry because you had to have it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And then Tanya, let's close with you. What would you like to see change in the industry?
Well, both Rebecca and Lilliana have covered a lot, but I think definitely more diversity throughout the industry at all levels. I think that a thoughtfulness and focus of what designers should be making and what retailers should be supporting. I think the idea that, retailers should really look at when a customer wants to buy something and pare back what they represent. It just became, everything started to look alike. So I think that if we can get to really celebrate individual voices more in leadership and in brands, I think that'll be a lot more inspiring to everyone.